Welcome to Linguistics Tube. This episode is part of my series which explores the skills involved in debating. Through these episodes, you will learn and practice several essential techniques that will allow you to perform debates successfully and easily. In this episode, we will look at some useful phrases that can be used during a debate. Let's get started. Specifically, in this episode, I will show you several phrases that all speakers can use during their section of the debate. Many of these phrases are examples of classic debate language, so adding these into your debate will help to make it more impressive and realistic. We'll move through the various sections of the debate, from beginning to end. So I'll firstly show you phrases to use in the opening statement, and finally you'll see phrases for the closing statement. If you are not familiar with the sections of debate and the parts within each section, then please watch the episode called Introduction to Debating first. In most phrases, you will see some words in italics. What are these? Well, in order to demonstrate how to use these phrases, I have chosen one topic that will be used in every phrase. It is a topic that you've already seen throughout this series. Animal testing should be banned. Of course, your debate topic will be different, so in order to use these phrases, you can simply change the italics words and insert the words for your debate topic. I should say that most of the phrases in each section are either or. In other words, they are different ways to say the same thing. Therefore, in your debate, you only need to use one of them, not all of them. Finally, if a phrase has underlined words in it, then these are interesting words that you should pay attention to. Firstly, let's look at the opening statement. As I explained in the episode called Introduction to Debating, the affirmative team's Speaker 1 has 4 tasks. The first task is to introduce the motion. I recommend that you start with something like Honourable Chairperson and members of the audience. Then you have 3 choices. Today, we are going to debate the motion that animal testing should be banned. Today, I hope to persuade you to agree that animal testing should be banned. This afternoon, we have the easy task of convincing you that animal testing should be banned. Notice that, in the third option, the speaker says that the task of persuading the audience is easy. This shows that the affirmative team are confident that they have a strong team line, arguments, and evidence, and are not nervous about debating the other team. The audience will be impressed by this confidence. Remember that the audience won't only be persuaded by what you say, but also by how you say it. So, it is essential to use language like this throughout the debate to get the audience on your side. The second part of the affirmative team's opening statement is to present their team's definition of the debate motion. Remember that this is their team's subjective interpretation of how they want to use the words of the motion in the debate. To introduce the definition, Speaker 1 can say sentences like, "We need to spend a moment to look at this motion more closely. We believe it is necessary to explain exactly how we have interpreted this motion." After introducing the definition, you state the definition. Here are 3 examples of a definition for this topic. We define animal testing as the testing of products on animals for use in the cosmetics industry. By banned, we mean that the use of animal testing should be controlled through legislation. It is undeniable that animal testing refers to its use in the cosmetics industry, and banned means that it cannot be used without official approval. Most people would take this motion to mean that the cosmetics industry can no longer test on animals, and also that animal testing cannot be used without permission. In the second example, Speaker 1 says that his or her definition is undeniable. This again demonstrates a high level of confidence, as it implies that no one can agree with the affirmative team's definition, especially the negative team, who are welcome to disagree with it in their opening statement. Hearing this might make them think twice about disagreeing with it, unless they are happy to have a lengthy conversation with the affirmative team to agree on a definition. This will delay the debate and won't benefit the affirmative team, so it is in the affirmative team's interest to avoid the negative team questioning their definition. The second underlined phrase, most people, has the same purpose. It helps the audience to start to agree with the affirmative team, as it implies that if someone disagrees with the definition, then he or she disagrees with the majority of people. No one wants to feel like they are in the minority, so hearing these words might encourage more people to accept the affirmative team's definition. The third part of the opening statement is to state the team line. Here you can see a team line for both teams. We believe that animal testing should be banned because it is cruel and inhumane. Overall, we believe that the benefits of animal testing outweigh any harm caused, and so it should not be banned. Finally, in the opening statement, Speaker 1 needs to explain the role of each speaker in his or her team. Here is an example. We have 5 strong arguments to present to you. Speaker 2 will present some of these in the next section, and we will discuss the rest of them during the free debate section. Finally, Speaker 3 will present our closing statement. You can see that the speaker claims that his or her arguments are strong and convincing, even before the audience have heard them. Therefore, Speaker 1 is already starting to persuade the audience to agree with them before any arguments or evidence have been presented. Those are the 4 essential parts of the opening statement. However, occasionally, Speaker 1 might choose to briefly mention his or her team's strongest argument. In that case, you could say, "Our strongest argument is that animal testing is cruel and inhumane. Our second speaker will present this in greater detail." Or, "I will leave the evidence for this to the next speaker." Remember that it isn't necessary to do this in the opening statement. It's probably better to save your arguments for the next section of the debate. Let's move on to the next section of a debate, in which the speakers present their team's arguments and evidence. Here are 2 ways to introduce and present an argument. I am sure you will agree that animal testing is cruel and inhumane. Any reasonable person will agree that animal testing is cruel and inhumane. Pay attention to the underlined words, "I am sure you will agree," and "any reasonable person will agree." These show the confidence of whichever team is saying it, which will impress the audience. The second example will definitely make the audience more likely to agree with and support whichever team says it, because no one wants to feel that he or she is an unreasonable person. In addition to presenting arguments, speakers must also present evidence to support them. There are several types of evidence, which you can learn about in the episode about the body section of a public speech. Here are two examples of different types of evidence. Firstly, animal testing is cruel and inhumane. The statistics prove this conclusively. A recent study found that 90% of animals tested on in the cosmetics industry suffered extreme pain, and 60% of these died as a result of the experiments. Let the facts speak for themselves. Isn't it obvious that this terrible situation can only be solved by a ban on using animal testing? Surely we all agree that doctors would not perform painful surgery without painkillers for humans. So isn't this situation exactly the same? Pay attention to the underlined phrases. Again, they encourage the audience to agree with the speaker's team by showing their confidence. You should also use these phrases when you present evidence. In a debate, you not only need to provide arguments and evidence to support your team's team line, you also need to argue against or attack the other team's arguments and evidence. This is called refuting or rebuttal. I already have an entire episode about this, so here I will just show you phrases that you can use when refuting. Let's read this example. We've just heard the other team use the weak and obvious argument that humans eat many more animals than the amount used for testing. Sadly, I must point out the lack of logic here. The last speaker seems to have forgotten that the vast majority of animals consumed by humans are killed in a humane and painless way, whereas those used in testing suffer extreme torture. While it is true that a tiny number of animals killed for food do suffer pain, and an even smaller number used in testing are given painkillers, finding one or two examples does not prove a point. Of course, there are always exceptions and extreme cases. Let's analyze this rebuttal in detail. We can identify 5 parts. Firstly, the speaker repeats or restates the argument that he or she is about to refute. We've just heard the other team use the weak and obvious argument that humans eat many more animals than the amount used for testing. Notice the underlined words here. Before the speaker states the argument, he or she is already showing the audience his or her opinion about it. Firstly, that it is a weak argument, and secondly, that they feel it is obvious. This implies that the argument is simplistic and unconvincing. Overall, this continues the subtle persuasion of the audience to agree with their team. You can do this not only by presenting good arguments, evidence, and rebuttals, but also by using persuasive language. The next part of the rebuttal is to say that you will refute the argument that you just restated. Sadly, I must point out the lack of logic here. The underlined word is amusing because it is sarcastic. That's because the speaker clearly isn't sad that he or she is refuting the argument. Thirdly, the speaker provides the main part of the rebuttal, which is the counter-argument to the other team's argument. The last speaker seems to have forgotten that the vast majority of animals consumed by humans are killed in a humane and painless way, whereas those used in testing suffer extreme torture. Again, the underlined words are amusing because the implication is that the other team do know and agree with the speaker's argument, but the other team only said their argument because they had forgotten that it was weak and obvious. You are definitely allowed to use this kind of humorous and playful language in your debate, as long as you do not use ad hominem attacks. The fourth part of this rebuttal is the speaker's admission that his or her rebuttal has some weaknesses. While it is true that a tiny number of animals killed for food do suffer pain, and an even smaller number used in testing are given painkillers, this is a very good idea because it stops the other team from using this weakness in their response to your rebuttal. So, during your preparation, if you see a weakness in your own argument or rebuttal, then the other team will probably see it too. Therefore, it's a good idea to mention it before they do. The final part of this rebuttal is to say that the weaknesses in the rebuttal are actually not a problem. Finding one or two examples does not prove a point. Of course, there are always exceptions and extreme cases. Together with the fourth part of this rebuttal, this will stop the other team from using this weakness in their response. Now that we've analysed an entire rebuttal, let's think about how you can introduce your rebuttal. There are a couple of ways to do this. If you want to have a polite and respectful debate, then you can begin like this. Let me review the other team's argument and show you its weaknesses. And if you prefer to have a more playful and humorous debate, then begin like this. I'm sure we all enjoyed the last speaker's performance, but let's now look at this rationally and stop the pantomime. The overall feeling here is that the speaker feels that the other team's argument is weak and not serious. He or she is suggesting that the other team are not participating in a serious debate, but instead are just having fun. This helps to introduce the rebuttal to the audience by already suggesting that the other team's argument is weak. To finish this section, let's have a look at a conclusion of a rebuttal. You can only support the motion if you believe that an animal's happiness is more valuable than a human's. It is obvious that banning animal testing will bring depression to many people, as makeup no longer exists to make themselves more beautiful. As you can see, this would be spoken by the negative team, and summarizes exactly why animal testing should not be banned. The final section of a debate is the closing statement. The negative team delivered theirs first, and the affirmative team finished the entire debate with their closing statement. Here are two examples of how to begin. In the time that remains, let me remind you of the arguments that our team have presented. So let me sum up. We have presented 3 arguments against this motion. Finally, the very last sentence of the closing statement is very important, because the audience will remember clearly the final words that they hear from each team. Here are some examples. Please follow your hearts and support the motion. Please follow your heads and oppose the motion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and support. Notice the difference between the underlined words in the first and second examples. The affirmative team asked the audience to follow their hearts, and the negative team asked them to follow their heads. This reveals that the foundation of each team's team line, arguments, and evidence are different. Specifically, the affirmative team have based their debate on emotion, ethics, and morality. In contrast, the negative team's debate is based on logic, reason, and cold rationality. The audience will need to decide which type of debate convinces them more. One more thing. Many students like to finish a speech or a debate with the phrase, "That's all, thank you." However, you must not say this, because it is boring, cliché, and weak. It is much better to finish with one of these 3 phrases. This is the end of the episode, which explored useful phrases that can be used during a debate. If you liked what you heard, then you can find more videos in my debating skills series, as well as other series on the topics of English and linguistics. Thank you for watching.